So Gavin Newsom went on with Chuck Todd, and he said he would have done everything differently on COVID. I think science took a bit of a hit. It should be alarming to all of us that all of a sudden how it became partisan. Should it be, Gavin? This is the first I'm hearing of this. The first I'm hearing of it. By the way, I just want to remind everybody that the average mortality risk over the last 3 years for those over 20 years old is 0.089%. That's the mortality rate from COVID over the 3 years. Adding the under 20s, if you add people under 20, it gets reduced to 0.065% fatality rate or mortality risk. That's a different. So, and let's remember that they pretended that they didn't know that COVID was never that deadly. It was never that deadly. That's the mortality risk. 0.065.
But that's almost 20% more likely than.
So now, yeah. So 100 times more likely than never. So if you're over 70 or over 80, then you have a concern. Or if you have a serious comorbidity, just like with the flu, you have to watch out if you have serious comorbidities, or if you're over 80. But if you're healthy and under 70, but first of all, this is the whole.
That's for Delta, by the way, wasn't it?
That's for the whole 3 years.
Oh.
This is said right here. This puts the average mortality risk over the last 3 years for those above 20 at 0.089%. And if you include the people under 20 years old, it goes down to 0.06%. And that comes from Dr. Sunatra Gupta from the UK. And
it wasn't until early February.
And so they knew it was a low fatality rate. And here's what, so remember, let's read. In fact, he knew it was a low fatality rate because he was out dining with groups of people and none of them are wearing masks. And that's when there was a mask mandate. And that's when they had people's restaurants closed down.
I thought he was corrupt, but it turns out he was ahead of the curve.
Yeah. Looks like he was a genius because he knew masking was bullshit. Isn't that amazing? He was a
told
genius.
The whole table. They were like, "Are you sure, Gavin? Take him off.
Take him off. This is all made up by Fauci." So here, let's watch their interview. Watch this.
During COVID, you were pretty strict with the lockdowns here, and it was an interesting piece in Harper's that sort of was critical of your decisions from this perspective. You found a way to allow the motion picture industry and the sort of the movie industry to get back to work, but you didn't allow people to grieve together at funerals or at churches. And that that this may be why there's such a polarized disconnect. What you prioritize, right? This is this anger between the populace and the elite, supposedly. Here you prioritize this industry, but you were tougher on those that just wanted to go worship. What do you say?
So now watch how many ways he doesn't address the issue or the question. Watch him not address. So Chuck Todd is saying, hey, obviously you let movie studios.
Tom Cruise is a friend. Mission Impossible
who were shooting movies in Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, they're shooting movies, and they were allowed to do that, and they were allowed to set up picnic tables and have 100 people sitting at picnic tables eating lunch without masks, while directly across the street they had restaurants closed down. Even their outside dining was closed down. But because you were in a movie, you could have an outside restaurant. But if you actually had an actual outside restaurant, that was illegal. And so I said the reason why they're doing that with the movie business is because the banks are invested in those movies and they run the government. And so so he knows where his bread is buttered. He's not going to go against Wall Street or the banks. And so the banks told him, you better let this movie happen. We got money invested. And so he did. And that's exactly why he did it. But watch him try to avoid this question and obfuscate. Why were movie studios allowed to open up 100-seat cafes outside when people who actually had already existing outside cafes had to close? And here's his non-answer.
That criticism.
I think there's a lot of humility, and we didn't know what we didn't know, and it was hardly it was we. Collectively.
I understand that.
Oh, see, so that's the whole 9/11 thing. Nobody could have seen this coming, although everybody could have seen that coming. And so that's everybody's wrong, so nobody's wrong. That's what he's trying to say. Everybody's wrong, so nobody's wrong. By the way, here we go.
I think all of us, in terms of.
By the way, did Chuck Todd just ask an intelligent question?
Yeah.
Isn't that wild? They must have turned up the journalism knob till 11. I like how he says anger between populists and elites, supposedly.
Yeah.
Did you hear him say that?
He slipped it right in.
Anger between populists and elites, supposedly. And he should have put his hand up on the side of his mouth when he said that.
By the way.
Supposedly. Supposedly. It's still a good point, though. Did somebody turn his reality knob up to 7? Not all the way. Qualify it as supposedly. Here we go.
Our collective wisdom, we've evolved. We didn't know what we didn't know.
We didn't know what we didn't know. You're a real fucking genius, Gavin.
We're all geniuses now.
We're all geniuses now. Hey, Gavin, maybe you could share some of this genius collective wisdom that you have now about COVID with Cornel West. That's all I'm saying. Maybe.
Gavin Newsom's ahead of the curve on that one? That's weird.
Experts in hindsight. We're all geniuses.
But think about what you ended up collectively prioritizing. You're prioritizing industry, in one specific one, but then didn't prioritize maybe ones whose maybe values you didn't connect with.
I don't think it's a binary. There was iterations within that theme. There was fits and starts. There were regional.
There were fits and starts. There were fits and starts. He sounds like the dude now. Right? From Big Lebowski. Hey, man, there were lots of fits and starts, ins and outs, a lot of what have yous.
Moving pieces.
There's a lot of ins and outs.
Pieces over here.
A lot of strands to keep in my head, man. A lot of strands in old Duder's head. Here we go.
Frameworks that had impacts more broadly defined. There were more industry specific frameworks. All of us went through a process. I mean, there was few states that didn't go into aggressive lockdowns, including Florida's Ron DeSantis.
No, I understand that, but it was
but within the framework of the
who opened the door. It's what industry got linked.
Do you see how he's not answering the question?
Yeah.
The question is, why did you favor certain industries in California?
Why did miss my Meemaw's funeral so movies could be made,
right?
Which I couldn't even go see at theaters because they were closed down.
Yeah. So you couldn't go to church. You couldn't go to church. You couldn't go to a funeral. My best friend from comedy died during COVID. I couldn't go to his funeral. I don't even know if they had one.
But they did make Cocaine Bear, so.
But they did, and you could if if they had his funeral on a movie set, we all could have went.
Yeah. If only that could have been cut content from the Barbie movie.
Mm.
And seeing which
ones did. All of it is legitimate in terms of reflection. All of it's legitimate in terms of processing lessons learned. We went through a process. I actually had at Sunnylands, which is the Camp David on the West Coast.
Right.
We brought together experts across the spectrum, people that supported our efforts, people that opposed them, international experts. And we spent 3 days really reflecting, stress testing what we did right, what we did wrong. We're actually putting out a report as it relates to our own lessons learned. I think this country would do well to advance a similar construct, not through the lens or prisms of an ideology, but through.
You think there should be almost like a 9/11?
I don't know. What is he even saying? He's not even saying
that hair is not good enough to cover this.
Yeah. It's not. It's not.
That hair covers a lot, but
so
don't cover
they
this.
did a lot of horrible things during COVID, and now he's trying to be. Hey, we were all trying our best.
We're all geniuses now, Jimmy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Commission on what lessons learned from this pandemic?
There's been versions of that, but they're immediately dismissed within the prism of our partisan frame. And so I'm at least trying to work across that and in context of all.
What is something you do differently?
I think we would have done everything differently because we understand
everything.
We would have done everything differently.
There's not one good thing.
You mean you wouldn't have had vaccine mandates? You would allowed people to go outside. You would allowed people to go to work. You mean you wouldn't have had mask mandates either? You mean you wouldn't have closed schools down? You mean so that's everything.
We wouldn't have dumped sand on all the skate parks.
We wouldn't have closed the beach.
Yeah, immediately dump sand on skate parks. They got that. They can't fix a pothole, but they can immediately wreck a skate park. Isn't that amazing? And I got to wait an hour for a cop to come to my house when there's somebody outside with a gun threatening me. But if you're surfing, they had a boat at you like that. So he says they would have done everything different.
Good. We would understand outdoors as an example.
The nature. You wouldn't have shut schools down. You'd have tried to figure out how to maybe have outdoor classrooms.
No, that's not. Well, now you're getting into
I'm being,
nuance.
I'm,
But I think the
Now you're
nature.
getting into specifics.
No. Now you're asking me a specific question about a real thing. And of course, I can't say that I wouldn't have shut schools down because my shit-lip Democratic base still thinks that that's the thing you're supposed to do because we're actually the ones who are anti-science. The Democrats were the ones who are actually spouting propaganda directly from Big Pharma that had no basis in science. And that's why we locked down. That's why we had mandates. That's why we had mask mandates. And none of it was based in science. None of it. And we had a vaccine that they said was going to stop the pandemic. And of course, that was never true.
You'd have done everything differently. Rick DeSantis
But he can't.
doesn't
But
say
he won't
that.
say
Yeah.
one thing. But he won't
Yeah.
say one thing he would have did differently.
Yeah.
He's ready for
I
president.
wouldn't. I would have maybe missed Halloween with my kids and not got
Yeah.
that booster.
Yeah.
Of the spread early on and understanding the epidemiology of that spread, understanding the spread in the context of how it spread very differently indoors than outdoors is one perfect example. What a lot of us would have done differently, including again in states, red states that shut down their beaches in the early part of the pandemic. I think a deeper understanding of around mask and mask wearing and N95s, KN95s. You go through a process across the spectrum in terms of being prepared, issues related to how we fundamentally address the distribution of vaccines and
He's not-
prioritization. You want to talk about prioritizations.
He won't say one goddamn thing he would do different. He hasn't said one goddamn thing yet, has he? Except that he would let people go outside.
I can't believe he's getting nailed by Chuck Todd. Like,
That's how bad COVID policy was, that a guy like Chuck Todd could dismantle a politician over it.
Chuck Todd, read Harper's. Why you close church and but have movies? Tell Chuck Todd.
Tell Chuck Todd.
Early on, in terms of those vaccines, you go through a series of things. And there's so many things we could have done differently.
You think this country can handle another pandemic, or do you think it would break us?
I think we have to. We're a resilient country, so it wouldn't break us. But I'm not convinced we've learned the lessons.
It broke a lot of working people. It certainly broke a lot of work. But
The last one, and I think science took a big hit. I think
Science.
health,
Science.
Read the history
health
books of
industry,
1918.
big
We're
hit.
still trying to.
Science took a big hit. Science didn't take a big hit. The people who lied, who said they represent science, those people took a big hit. Science didn't
I
take a
think the
big hit.
owners of science took a hit.
The owners of science took a big hit because they were constantly lying. They were lying about the origin of the virus. They were lying about where it came from. They were lying about funding the origin of the virus. They all were lying.
Yeah.
Why? Because Fauci corrupted them with millions of dollars. And so the scientists who said that the virus came from the an animal or a bat or a pangolin, they lied. And we know it now because of the Freedom of Information Act. They all thought it came from the Wuhan lab until Fauci dangled $8 million in front of their face. And then they all switched on a dime like that. And we all know because of the Freedom of Information Act that they knew they were lying.
He's like, maybe next time I wouldn't get all my information from Jimmy Kimmel.
Yeah, maybe don't get all your COVID information from late night talk shows.
Like, he'd have been better off sticking to his guns that it was great what they did. That
Because
would have been better for him than this was.
To lie
really
and say
bad.
we saved a lot more lives than really could
He
have been
should-
lost, and that
yes.
kind of like we don't. If we had opened
This
up,
looks
how many
bad.
lives would we have lost? He could have done that bullshit
Because you know what a
line
screw
and-
up this is? Because there's an MSNBC with Dum Dum here who's killing him. And he's like, he just said I would have done everything differently. So all the idiots here that still got cloth masks on that would just go for him because of his hair and he's feeding into their mania, he just sold them out.
yes.
Like, he don't look good to me. Who's he look good to now?
Now he doesn't look good to anybody. So he doesn't look good to someone like me who was against all that stuff in real time because I actually cared about the science enough to get informed about it after I got vaccine injured. And then, so he's not appealing to me, and he's now throwing his shit-lib Democrat voters
Yeah.
under the bus by saying everything that they do and are advocating for still is wrong. That's what he's saying. Here we go.
Figure out.
Yeah, no, and but that's that's
Pandemics
alarming.
divide people.
That's alarming. It should be alarming to all of us that all of a sudden health became partisan. And that's something that we're going to pay a big price. You're right, going forward, but it won't break us because
His health became partisan, and we're all going to... Who made it partisan?
Mm-hmm.
Who made health care partisan? It was the establishment and the Democrats who made health care partisan. Am I wrong about this?
No,
Greg?
you're not wrong. You're
That's
not wrong at all.
who did it, right?
This guy, out of his recall, when he won, he immediately went to, pivoting to hardcore COVID protocols. It goes, they didn't just say yes to Gavin Newsom. They said yes to protecting our children. They said yes to making it safe for us to vote. They said yes for this. They said yes for that. And it was all based around him pushing all these COVID protocols even harder, mask mandates, the whole 9 yards. And as we know, California has some of the craziest draconian COVID laws,
when
right?
He talks about how health became partisan, look what they did in California. They passed a law that would punish doctors for practicing medicine. They call it spreading misinformation. They just made it up. Right now, they just repealed it because it's 100% unconstitutional.
Yeah.
Even that was wrong?
So they were trying to criminalize a conversation between a doctor and their patient. You know the thing that they scream that the right wing wants to do over abortion? The Democrats did it over COVID. It was horrible. And they did this after we knew better. This was done recently. So, and I'm going to cover it in another segment about how they just quietly repealed this. Why? Because it's unconstitutional. You're outlawing speech between a doctor and their patient. Mm-hmm. There's already laws that say it's illegal to do bad medical treatment. It's already illegal. You didn't need this law, but they passed this law to scare the hell out of doctors who are actually practicing medicine and trying to give people early treatments that could possibly help with COVID, because they wouldn't give you anything. They wouldn't give you ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine. They wouldn't give you zinc, vitamin D3. What they did was give you nothing and intubate you, which they now admit killed people. So if you went to the hospital, they were gonna not treat you right, and it's probably end up with you being killed by their treatment. And so and again, we can't say, I'm not saying ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine treats COVID. That's not what we're saying. We're saying they weren't allowed to practice medicine, and they criminalized it, and they intimidated doctors, and they did it all for big pharma profit. And who did that? Gavin Newsom and the Democrats in California.
And he was wrong, and he says it.
And they're 100% wrong.
Yeah, but if we only knew now what we knew then, or
since where did I know
it? Better than all the people on TV that he just said everything we did
it was wrong. Mm-hmm. So somehow I knew it in real time that he was wrong. Somehow we knew it at the show that they were wrong in real time. Somehow Craig knew it in real time that they were wrong. But somehow now they were so smart they just got it wrong.
What assistant just worked up the nerve to tell him now?
Right.
Because I feel like all these people, they just found out now the things that were being said from the beginning.
That the lockdowns were a lie, masks were a lie.
It piles up. And
the fact that we could vaccinate our way out of this pandemic was a lie. Those were all lies. Those were all disseminated on the Jimmy Dore show in June of 2021. We knew all that in June of 2021. He's just figuring it out now in September of 2023. 2 years later, a pothead comedian knew the facts about COVID and told my audience in real time in June of 2021. By the way, YouTube tries to bury that video. You can't find it. It's with Dr. Robert Malone. It's very hard to find, but it got almost 800,000 views, even with them suppressing the hell out of it, because you couldn't get that information anywhere else.
Well, I call him Dr. Florida because he's right for the wrong reasons.
Yes. And when we did that video with Dr. Robert Malone, we sent it to YouTube for pre-screening because I didn't want to get kicked off YouTube for medical misinformation. So everything that's in that video is medical information that was already vetted by YouTube. So I was allowed to put it up on YouTube. And then I wanted to send another video to get vetted before I put it up. And YouTube said, we're not doing that anymore. What? You're not going to check my video to make sure it's okay to put up? They said, no, we don't have the manpower to do that. I go, well, when I put it up, you're going to check it, right? They go, yeah. I go, so you're going to check it. You just won't check it before I put it up. And they said, that's correct.
Well, because they don't know until they're told.
That's right. So they don't know if there's some. So they got in trouble for doing that. So meaning whoever checked my video that told the truth about COVID with Dr. Robert Malone, they got in trouble from someone higher up. You're not allowed to do that. You have to let them put it up so then we can yank their channel down at will. That's the theory that I have that's going on. So now they won't. So now YouTube, they're going to check every video I put up, even if I don't publish it. They're going to check every video I put up on my channel after I put it up. And if I ask them to check it before, they say no. Why do you think they would do that?
Oh, okay. So it's the same thing with Twitter and all the other ones. At that time, there's somebody from whatever agency or government who says, hey, can you take this down? So they're not even, because I don't believe they're doing the work of any of it. They had government people in there
of course.
who would put in a list. Can you take this down and this down?
And I'm sure my video was on there.
They can't tell you ahead of time because it has to be run through the censorship industry.
That's right.
Before you get to know what it is. And if your channel gets taken down, that's just a bonus.
Hey, come see us on tour. We're going to be in Tampa, Boca Raton, Orlando, Dallas, Houston, San Diego, Bloomington, Illinois, Indianapolis, and Levittown, New York. Wow, that's a lot of dates. See you there.